Dear ones, 'tis the season for toppling Confederate monuments. And this particular location feels as if it were the epicenter, the beginning, when students tore down the iconic statue at the front gates of the University of North Carolina on the evening of August 20th, 2018, leading to the confrontation between Klansmen and right-wing activists and fresh-faced students, and the firing of our chancellor. Looking at the videos of cops manhandling and clashing with young people, black, white, and Asian, feels prescient. But I can't help thinking of the lithe Bree Newsome, who climbed the flagpole in Columbia, South Carolina in 2015 and ripped down the Confederate flag as a galvanizing and generative moment. Yes, Black Lives Matter was a full-fledged movement by that point, but a certain focus had already begun to take over the young folk, and the memorialization of the Confederacy felt absolutely galling. It was galling before, but the idea that something could be done about the celebration of the lost cause had become imaginable. But it wasn't only about the Civil War. It was about Jim Crow. It was about up-south Chicago and Detroit. It was about gentrification. I was an undergraduate here at UNC in the 1980s and walked past Silent Sam every day. It is not that I didn't see it or know its history. On the day of its dedication, a local millionaire, Julian Carr, who paid for it, bragged about whipping a black wench until he shredded her clothes. Every black student I knew that story, and it cut us to our core. Yet imagining it actually coming down was not considered a possibility. The fact that it would stand so arrogantly well into the 21st century seemed an inevitability. That such righteous destruction would one day happen in Charlotte, Durham, Fayetteville, New Orleans, and ultimately Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, would have struck me as science fiction in 1984. That the names of racist generals would be stripped from 100-year-old buildings the least possible. Still, what I most would have struggled to imagine is that certain people would be up in arms were it to ever happen. That they would quite literally take over a state capitol building, bearing arms, in anger, to keep monuments up. That we might have another civil war over the matter. For me, a poor black boy from the swamps of eastern North Carolina, the Civil War was far from a lost cause, let alone a done war. I had underestimated how unfinished. Most southern states are host to many Civil War reenactors, many of them quite literate, supposedly sticklers for historical accuracy who can argue about geography all night. But the fantasies these monuments and symbols represent don't embarrass them. I find this mystifying. They still defend these murderous, enslaving individuals, these traitors. Even though, being such students of the War of Northern Aggression, they know full well these monuments were erected decades after the war had been won to bolster the big brother eyes of Jim Crow, to reinforce the notion of racial superiority. These statues are monuments to that war, not to the war of Lee and Sherman and Grant. The coming war will not be about the monuments, but the mentalities. Let's be clear on what that future war will be about. Why hold on to these antiquated notions of skin color signifying some type of superiority? Why cling to a past of loss and degradation? Those who fought for the Confederacy clearly had their backs broken in the end. Why was holding other human beings in bondage a cause worth fighting for other than money? When most of the white men who died for the Confederacy were as poor as church mice. Yes, it is hard to imagine we have come to this moment in the early years of the 21st century. I'm a lifelong fan of Star Trek, who lived to see the first black Vulcan elected to the presidency of the United States, so this entire situation feels very like something out of the back of Gene Roddenberry's mind. I love that MLK exhorted Nichelle Nichols to keep her job as Lieutenant Nyota Uhura because she was the only black woman on television who represented black women in a position that was not a maid. It is fun and amazing to speculate on what MLK would have thought of Kamala Harris.